Hey everyone, Jake here for American Muscle, and in this video we're taking a look at the Eibach Sport-Plus Suspension Kit fitting 2015 and newer Mustang GTs without MagneRide. If handling is your priority, then you have to check out this kit. Combining two of Eibach's most popular upgrades into one simple setup, the net result here is going to be vastly improved handling characteristics, better overall vehicle dynamics, and a cooler, lowered stance. So if all that sounds like your speed, then stay tuned. If I sound or look a little extra excited, well, it's because I am. I'm a big fan of handling upgrades, and tossing a big car like an S550 or an S650 around a corner is just so unbelievably satisfying. I also love the suspension upgrades, especially sway bars and some good springs. Now, luckily for all of us, Eibach has both for these cars, and they combine them into one nice kit. So this includes their popular Sportline lowering springs and their front and rear anti-roll bar kit. So it gives you everything you need to up your Mustang's handling game. We'll start though with the springs. Now again, these are Eibach's Sportline springs. So right off the bat, they're gonna lower your car quite a bit. S550s will sit about 1.5 inches lower in the front and 1.3 inches lower in the rear, while S650s are going to sit about 1.8 inches lower both front and rear. And since you're physically lowering the car, that means your center of gravity is also, of course, lower, and that is inherently going to improve your car's handling just because the mass is physically lower down and it's not going to move as much when you carve through a corner. But there's more to it than just a lower stance. These are significantly firmer than your factory springs, which means that they're also going to help reduce or eliminate roll, pitch, and dive as you brake or turn into a corner. Now, all of this makes them ideal for performance driving. So if you're hitting the track often, if you're doing autocross, or even if you just drive down some twisty roads regularly, these are going to make for a significant improvement in handling. Now, the ride is, of course, going to be firmer. It's not going to be punishing, but it will be more firm than stock, so expect that going in. The front springs, though, do feature a progressive spring rate. So you can see here that the coils up top are much more tightly wound than the coils down at the bottom. So the spring can compress initially for compliance over bumps, but it'll be firmer once everything really starts to shift. Now, if you combine this kit with Eibach's front and rear anti-roll bars, that really makes these cars come alive. Both the front and rear bars are tubular in design, and each features three-way adjustments so you can dial in the handling exactly how you want it. If you have it on the softest setting, it's gonna help quell understeer. If you put it on the firmest setting, it's gonna help quell oversteer. So really, you can adjust the balance of the car however you want it. Now, this front one is a massive 35mm diameter with a 25mm bar for the rear. Now, both of these are gonna be appreciably larger than your factory sway bars. So that additional diameter here means more strength, and that means that it's gonna be much more resistant to roll and any side-to-side weight transfer, which makes things much more stable in the corners and can make the admittedly large Mustang turn in and handle like a much smaller car. And the adjustability here is also really nice. So if you know you're hitting the track or carving up a mountain road, you can crank these up, or you can just put them in their softest setting for the daily commute. The anti-roll bars are made from thick tubular steel, and the springs are made from cold-wound high tensile strength steel, so everything here is quite solid. Plus, it's all covered obviously in Eibach's signature bright red powder coat for good looks and enhanced durability. So these should last you quite a long time. Not to mention, you get new bump stops, new gaiters for the front end, and you also get new sway bar bushings and brackets. And these also have little Zerk fittings at the top. That means that these bushings are greasable, which is going to help extend their life. So again, everything you get here should last you quite a long time. And it's a very complete kit, giving you pretty much everything you need, short of some end links and maybe some top hats or shocks for the front end. But if your shocks and all that stuff is still in really good shape and you're just looking for an improvement, this is gonna get you more than you even bargained for. Pricing for this kit, though, is going to come in at about $975, which, though it is admittedly a lot of money, it is a really good value for what you're getting here. This is a premium product, and Eibach puts a lot of research and development into what they make, so the price tag here isn't really all that unexpected. But again, you are getting a lot for your money, and believe me, you are going to feel the difference immediately once you've got everything installed. Speaking of installation, we're gonna give this kit a 3 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and this job is gonna take you the better part of a day to complete. Now, while this is not a ton of stuff that you see on the table, this is pretty much everything save for a few little pieces of hardware. Access can be tricky, and you are gonna need a spring compressor to disassemble and reassemble your front struts. And if you've never done that before, it's gonna take some time, so just be patient. However, everything here is going to bolt right on without modification, so you don't need to modify anything on your car in order to get it all fitted. With that said though, let's head out to the shop and we'll walk you through the process.
Tools required for this install include a couple different size impact guns, an electric ratchet, a hammer, a clip remover tool, a 6mm Allen wrench, a marker, a hand ratchet, 17mm wrench, 18 and 21mm ratcheting wrenches, a caliper hook, a few different size extensions, vice grips, a flathead screwdriver, a couple different size swivel adapters, 13 and 15mm swivel sockets, 10, 13, 15, 18, 21, and 24mm sockets, a pass-through ratchet with a 13/16 pass-through socket, a pry bar, as well as pole jacks or jack stands, and a spring compressor. What's up guys? Today we're installing some suspension on our Mustang, so let's get started. So starting with the front, we're gonna remove our sway bar end link from the bracket on our strut. Now right behind this bracket, there's a nut that you can get a 17mm wrench on to hold, while you get an 18mm socket on the nut on the front and pull that off. And then you can pull down on your sway bar and pop your end link out. And I'm just gonna throw the nut back on there for now. Next we can grab a clip remover tool to pop these two clips off. Next, we're gonna have to remove our brake caliper to get to the two nuts on our strut. So then we'll just grab a 15mm socket, remove our two bolts. Now we can slide our caliper off. I've got a caliper hook up here that we can hook our caliper to keep it up and out of the way. Now with our caliper removed, we can just pop our rotor off to give us a little extra space. Next we can take a 24mm socket and remove these two nuts. Now we're gonna hold the other side with a 21mm wrench while we do this. And now with our nuts removed, we can take a hammer and smack these bolts to knock them out of place. I'm going to start with the bottom one here. Now I'm going to take an extension on the other side to tap these bolts the rest of the way through. Next we can go in the engine bay and take a 15mm socket to remove our 3 upper strut nuts. Now you're going to want to have one hand underneath supporting the weight of the strut as you remove these. And now with one nut left, I've got one hand supporting the weight of the strut while we take this last nut off. And then we can slide our strut out. So now with our strut removed, we're gonna wanna take a marker and make a mark on the top hat of which side faces outward. So right here, lined up with the front, we have the stud. So I'm just gonna make a line here. And that way we know which way it faces out. Now next we're gonna be undoing our sway bar mounts. Now right down here, you're looking at the driver's side. We have access to our frontmost bolt. However, our back one's blocked by the alternator, so we'll be able to do that one through the wheel well. On the passenger side, you can get to both of them through the engine bay. So I'm gonna take an 18mm socket with a swivel adapter and a couple extensions to get on there, and then take that off. So now we can come to our other bolt here. We'll take an 18mm ratcheting wrench to get to it. It's gonna be pretty hard to see. Now this is just for the driver's side. As I stated before, you can get to the passenger side through the engine bay. Next, we can fully remove our end link. So we'll take an 18mm socket and 17mm wrench to remove this nut. And now you can do that same thing on the other side. So now we're ready to remove our sway bar. I'm over on the passenger side, where you're gonna have a buddy on the other side feeding the sway bar out while you slide it through here. So now we've got our factory strut over at the spring compressor. We're gonna compress our spring to remove our top hat. That way we can get our new spring in. Now I've got a vice grip here holding the spring against our mounting arm, so that way it doesn't spin while we have it under load. So now with everything lined up, we can go ahead and compress this spring. So now once we have our spring compressed, we can pop this cap off of our stud. And then you're gonna want a 13/16 pass-through socket. We'll get that onto the nut. Then you'll get a 10mm socket to hold the stud, and we can start loosening this up. Now once you've got that loosened up, you're gonna grab a hand to hold the strut and finish working that nut off. So now with our strut removed, we can loosen up the tension on our spring. And now we can grab our top hat, remove our spring, grab our new spring, and then lower this down until we can grip onto the top hat. And we'll slowly start compressing our spring. Before you go too crazy, we'll get those vice grips on there again. So now we're ready to reinstall our strut, but before we do this, we have a new dust boot and bump stop. So So we're gonna slide our dust boot off, slide our bump stop off. Then we can grab our new bump stop, the flat side's going up. Slide that on. And then we'll get our dust boot, slide that over. And then we can slide our strut into place. And we'll thread our nut on top. And now we can take that same 13/16 pass-through socket and 10mm socket and tighten down our nut. And now we can relieve tension on our spring compressor. Pop our vice grips off. You can pull this out and then do the same thing for your other strut. Now before we get our new sway bar installed into the Mustang, we're gonna get our bushings on there first. Now we have some lube that we're gonna run across the inside of our bushing, and then we can get these on. We're gonna do this now because it'll be easier to install them when it's out of the car rather than when it's in there. So we'll grab the included lube. We'll put some down inside our bushing. And then we'll just run that thin layer across inside there. And then we can slide this on to the bar. And then we'll do that same thing for the other one. So now we can get our sway bar back in the same way we got it out. I've put the plastic wrap that it was packaged in on top, just so that we don't scratch it while we're maneuvering it into place. Now with our sway bar in place, we can pull off that plastic wrap. Now next we can install our brackets onto our bushings. Straighten out our sway bar. Now we're working on the passenger side now since we saw the driver before. Just line up our holes and thread our bolts in. Now before you tighten these, you're gonna wanna get your bolt started on the other side. I've already done that. So now we can grab our impact gun with an 18mm socket and a couple extensions to get down in there and tighten these down. And then you can repeat the same process on the other side. So now we can reinstall our strut. Slide our nuts on top. And we'll just leave these loose for now. Next we can reinstall our end link. Now we have 3 holes in our sway bar. The outer 2 are to correct oversteer or understeer, and the middle one is just your standard. So we're gonna be using the middle. So we're gonna slide our end link through and we'll thread our nut on the back. And then we'll slide the top in. We're just gonna thread these on by hand for now until we get this reconnected to our knuckle, just so that we have these in now and we don't have to worry about being able to fit them later. Now we'll reconnect the knuckle to our strut. Now we have our bolt with the splines. Bolt's gonna be going from front to rear. And now I'm just gonna give the bolts a couple taps with a hammer to get them started. And then we can take our 2 nuts, thread those onto the other side. And then we'll grab our 24mm socket for the nut side, 21mm wrench for the bolt side. You're just gonna hold the bolt nice and straight so it presses in straight. Now we can take our 18mm socket and 17mm wrench to tighten down our end links. Now we can go back up top and take our 15mm socket to tighten down our upper strut nuts. Next we can reinstall our rotor. Now I'm going to throw a lug nut on there just to hold that in place. Next we can pull our caliper off of the hook. And we'll slide it over our rotor. And now with our caliper in place, we can reinstall our 2 bolts. And then we'll take our 15mm socket to tighten these down. And now finally, we can clip in our 2 clips. And then you're going to repeat that whole process on the other side. Now moving on to the rear, we're going to start with our upper shock mount. We have 2 18mm bolts, so we'll grab an 18mm socket to pull out. Next we can come to the bottom of our lower control arm to remove these 2 15mm bolts holding our shock in. So I'll take a 15mm socket, I'm going to pull this first one out, and I'm going to take a hand to grab onto the shock before I pull the second out. And then we can fully remove our shock. Next we can take a 13mm socket to remove our brake line bracket. Next we can take a 10mm socket to remove this bolt holding our brake line bracket in. And then we're going to be undoing our end link up here. So we'll take an 18mm ratcheting wrench and a 6mm Allen wrench to pop that nut off. Then we can pop this bracket off, pop our end link out of place. I'm just going to throw this bracket and the nut back on so we don't lose it. So now to get our springs out, we're going to have to lower our rear subframe. So I've got a couple of pole jacks supporting the subframe on each side. We've got a bracket with 2 13mm bolts and a 21mm bolt that we're going to loosen up, as well as a 21mm bolt in the back. We're going to do the whole thing on the other side. We're going to drop it at the same time to get our springs out. So now we're coming to this bracket here. We're going to remove these 2 13mm bolts first with a 13mm socket. And then we're going to switch to a 21mm socket. We're just going to loosen this for now. We're not going to fully remove it yet. Next we can move back to the bolt that's right in front of our muffler. You're going to need an extension for this one. Same 21mm socket, and we'll loosen this up. So now I went and replicated those steps on the other side. We have those bolts loosened up. So now we're going to start with this side. We can fully remove these 2 bolts and then start lowering this side of the subframe down to get our spring out. So now we can start lowering our pole jack until we have enough slack to get our spring out. So now I'm going to use a pry bar to help me pop this spring off. So now we're ready to put our new spring in. So we're going to reuse our factory spring isolator. Drop that on top. and then we can slide this into place. And then we'll start raising our pole jack. And we'll just raise that up until our spring is seated. Next, we can reinstall our bracket. We're gonna start with our 2 smaller bolts. And then we're gonna work on our larger bolt. You might need to get a pry bar back here just to move your subframe around. Now we're just gonna start that a couple threads so that we can do the other side. Now we're gonna do the same thing on our rear bolt. Just get that in a few threads for now, and then you can repeat the whole process for the spring on the other side. So now it's just a matter of lining up our subframe and getting our bolts back installed. We're gonna start with these 2 smaller 13mm bolts. You're gonna match up the hardware impressions. Might be a little bit hard to see on camera. So I'm just gonna take a socket and just snug these up where they sat before. And then we're gonna do the same thing with this big bolt. You might need to get a pry bar up in here to shift it around a little bit. And now once we have this in place, we can take a 21mm socket to tighten down our bolt. And then we'll switch to our 13 to fully tighten down our 2. And now we can do that same thing for our rear bolt. And then we'll repeat that same process on the other side. So now we're gonna need to pop the top mount off of our shock so that we can install our new bump stop. So now we can take a flathead screwdriver to pop the cap off of the top here. And then we'll grab a 15mm socket to remove the nut. Now you want to slide this off straight so we can put it back in exactly the same place. Slide this off, pop our old bump stop out of there, and then we can add our new one. Slide it back over. And we'll put the top back on, thread our nut, and tighten it back down. And we can put our cap back on top, repeat the same process for the other side, and we can get these onto the Mustang. So now we can reinstall our shock. I'm gonna get these bottom bolts in first, just thread it in by hand. And then we can pull down to get our top mount into place, thread in those bolts. Now I'm gonna take an 18mm socket and pull down on this a little bit to line up the hardware holes, the hardware impressions, and tighten them down. And then we'll come underneath and take our 15mm socket to tighten our bottom 2 bolts. And then you can do that same thing on the other side. Next, we can remove our rear sway bar. So we're gonna take a 13mm socket and remove these 2 bolts. Now once you've done that on the other side, we can go ahead and pop off this shackle. That'll make it a little bit easier so that we can slide this out. So now we can slide our sway bar out. I'm going through the driver's side. You can really go any way here. So now we can assemble our new sway bar. I'm gonna put these bushings on first. We're not gonna put the shackles on yet because it will just make it easier to get it in without them. These are gonna go on the outside of these ridges here. We're gonna lube them up and slide them on. So now we can take some of this lube, put it inside our bushing. And then we'll just get a nice coat. And we can open this up, press it onto our sway bar, and do the same thing on the other side. So now we're ready to install our sway bar. You want this dip in the middle to be going down, and then we can slide this over to the other side. Now we can grab our bracket and put that over the bushing, and then we'll thread our bolts back into place. And then we'll grab our 13mm socket to tighten these down. And then you can do that same thing on the other side. So now we're ready to button up the rest of our rear suspension. First thing we're gonna do is take our end link and get it into the middle hole here. Now, just like on the front, our two outer holes are correct over and understeer. Our middle hole is just our standard. So we're gonna throw it in the middle, and then we'll add our new bracket. This little ear is gonna go towards the outside. And then we'll slide the nut on our sway bar end link. And then we can grab our 10mm bolt for our brake line bracket. Thread that in. Now I'm gonna take a 10mm socket and tighten this brake line down first. And then we can grab our 18mm ratcheting wrench and our 6mm Allen and tighten down our nut. And then with that installed, we can reinstall that 13mm bolt up top that holds in our upper brake line bracket. And then we'll take a 13mm socket and tighten that down. And then we can repeat that same process on the other side. So that'll wrap up this review and install of the Eibach Sport-Plus Suspension Kit for your 2015 and newer Mustang GT without Magna Ride. Thank you for watching, and for all things Mustang, keep it right here at AmericanMuscle.com.